Excel Basics video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you most of the basics that you need to know in order to get started using Microsoft Excel. And the version of Excel that I'm going to be using in this tutorial is Excel 2016 for Windows. Having opened a blank workbook. You can see that there are lots of templates to choose from. This is a Welcome to Excel tour, and it's a good way in order to really learn how to use Excel fully and properly. It's best to start with a blank workbook. So I'm just going to double click on that to select a blank workbook and open it up. And the first thing we need to do is learn about the layout that we have in Excel 2016. There are certain terms that you're going to need to know. First of all, across the top we have some tabs. Okay, we have the Home tab, the Insert tab, Page Layout, and more, as you can see. Each of these tabs is pretty important. And when you click on a particular tab, it opens up a ribbon. Okay, this is the ribbon for the Home tab. If I click the Page Layout tab, I get the Page Layout ribbon. Now each ribbon is divided up into groups. So you can see I have a Themes group, I have a Page Setup group, a Scale to Fit group, and these are all on the Page Layout ribbon. And I get to that ribbon by clicking on the Page Layout tab. So those are some important terms that you'll need to know. Tab, ribbon, group, and you'll notice in the corner of some of these groups, there's what I like to call a launch button. Okay, so the Scale to Fit group has a little launch button in the corner. The Sheet Options group has a launch button in the corner. The Arrange group doesn't seem to have one. Now, what are these launch buttons? Basically, you can click on those launch buttons to give you even more options. So what Microsoft has done here is they've tried to fit all of the page layout options on this. I think it's important to start with that terminology because I'm going to be using it throughout this tutorial. All right, a couple of other layout terms that you're going to need to know. In the spreadsheet itself, this is the spreadsheet, and spreadsheets are made up of columns and rows. Okay, so you can see we have an A column, a B column, C column, etc. And if I browse to the right, okay, you can see that there's even more than that. And if needed, it'll just keep going to the right, adding more and more columns. Okay, once it gets to Z, it goes to AA, column AA. And so lots and lots of columns in this spreadsheet. Now, what about rows? I have row number 1, row number 2, row number 3. Okay, so spreadsheets are made up of columns and rows. Now, the intersection of a column and a row is what produces a cell. So this is a cell, and every cell in Excel has a name. Okay, this particular cell is named C2, and you can imagine how I got that name. It's just the intersection of the column and the row. This particular cell here has a name. It's M9, and this is I16. In addition to columns, rows, and cells, there's another part of a spreadsheet that you need to know about, and that is a range. Okay, now a range is a group of cells that are together. A range could be this, it could be this, it could be this, it could be any number of things. It's basically a group of cells that are next to each other, that are together. And some background information that you're going to need in order to really use Excel properly. Now that we've I should add a couple more. You can see that this is all on a sheet, sheet 1. And I can add a sheet 2, sheet 3, etc. Each of these sheets added together is what creates a workbook. So sheets or worksheets add up to a workbook. I'm going to type in A1 and I'll type movie inventory. And you'll notice that my text is bigger than the cell itself. It goes too far to the right. How I could maybe fix this. It's not really a problem, but how could I fix it if I want to make it look a little nicer? Well, what I can do, I can stretch out any column or even any row if I want to by just putting my mouse between any two column letters. So this is column A, column B. Put my mouse between the two, right on the line or very close to it, and you'll notice that my mouse cursor changed into a double-sided arrow. That's a good sign. So now I can click and drag to stretch that out to make it wider. So I've got my title in there. Now I'm going to click on A2 and I'm going to type in the word title. That's where I'll put the movie title. Now I'll tap tab to move over to the right, and I'll put in date purchased, tab again, rating, tab again, value, tab again, genre, and tab again, location. And let's say I put in Star Wars. Again, I could tap tab to move over to the right. I could say, okay, I purchased it 2007. It's rated PG. It's worth maybe $5, and it's science fiction, and it's located in the living room. Okay. So that's an example of data entry, how you can enter data into a spreadsheet by clicking on a cell or somehow getting on a cell, typing, and then hitting either tab to move to the right or enter to move down. Now, as another example, I'm going to type in another record, and I'll put in some other information here, and I want to click twice quickly. Now I've jumped inside it, and I have this cursor, and I can move it where I want it to be, fix the misspelling, hit return. Again, give me a few minutes to put in a few more records, and then I'll resume the tutorial. Okay, so I've finished putting in some movies here, and some records is what they're called. Each of these rows contains a record. And to help you see this a little bit better, I'm going to zoom back out a little bit so you can see I've put in quite a few movies here. Now, what we need to do next is dress this up a little bit, make it look a little better. It just doesn't look quite right to our eye at this point. So what are some things that we can do to make this look nicer? First of all, here at the top, my title basically of this spreadsheet, it's kind of off to the side and it doesn't have anything that makes it stand out and look different. So I'm going to click on it, on the cell, and I'm going to click up here at the top on the Home tab and the Home ribbon. I can click on Bold to give it a bold look. So that will help it stand out. Notice that I can also use the Paint Bucket tool to paint the background of that cell. I may or may not want to do that. In this case, I don't necessarily want that. So I'm going to click the arrow next to it, and I'm going to go to No Fill. I could also change the color of the text itself. Okay, so that is also an option. I'm going to go back to black in this case. In addition, I could italicize or underline. Those are all good options to have. But that will help the text stand out a little bit. Another thing I can do is click on cell A1 and drag. I'm still holding the mouse click, and I'm going to drag until I've covered all of the content of my spreadsheet. So the content of this spreadsheet ends at column F. I don't have anything beyond that. So I just clicked and dragged to get all the way across. Now watch what I can do. On the Home tab, Home ribbon, there's a button here in the alignment group called Merge and Center. And if I click on that, see what it did? It merged all of those cells together. So this is now one big cell, and it centered it. Okay, so merge and center is very helpful to do what I just did, to basically break down the walls between these cells and make it one big cell, and then to center it. That looks a lot better. The other thing, like I said before, the text not quite fitting in the cell kind of bothers me. Go up here at the top and just go between any two of the column letters and double click. And if you do that, look what happens. It automatically will perfectly size the column so that all of the text will fit. I could, instead of double clicking between every single column one at a time, look what I can do. Click and drag on the column letters all the way across to the end of my data, and then double click between any two of these. It doesn't matter which. Double click, and notice now it automatically resized every column. Every column that I had selected was affected by that double click. Next up, I guess I do want to click here on Movie Inventory and underline it to set that apart as the title. And then down here, I would like to make all of these column names different. So I'll highlight them and I'll go up and make them bold and let's say italicized. Now, the way I did that so fast, you may not have noticed, I simply clicked on the row number and it highlighted the entire row all the way to the right, and so that selected it, and then to affect it I just chose bold and italicize, and it affected everything that's selected. So, and I didn't show this explicitly, so let me just quickly do that. Notice that you can affect the rows as well. So I can make rows taller than they would have otherwise been. I can double click between them to perfectly resize. I can affect more than one at a time by selecting more than one row. So all of those same techniques that I showed about the columns can also be used with the rows.